Robert G. Ferguson, or Fergie, graduated from the University of Cincinnati in 1971. Soon after, he answered the call of the fraternity and became the Epsilon Upsilon chapter advisor at Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio. For 50 years, Fergie has impacted the lives of countless Delts, not just at Marietta, but nationwide. He has encouraged countless men to live lives of excellence and rise to their fullest potential, even inspiring some to serve as chapter advisors, division vice presidents, and arch chapter members. Rightfully so, Fergie was cited to the Distinguished Service Chapter and has been the recipient of many of the fraternity's highest awards, including the Al Sheriff Award, and is the namesake of the Robert G. Ferguson Chapter Advisor of the Year Award. In addition to his years of exceptional leadership and service, Fergie has been a loyal supporter of the Educational Foundation since its inception. Fergie, thank you for all that you have done for the fraternity and its members.
If you've ever met Fergie at a Carnia, Division Conference, or Emerge, you know just how great of a person and volunteer he is. Looking back, the amount of lives that he has impacted over the past 50 years of being an advisor is just absolutely monumental. And I have to say, just as Fergie has, all of our advisors make a huge impact in the lives of undergraduates while they're there in college, but also after they leave. I want to give a very special shout out to David Baker. He's the current advisor of the South Carolina chapter and one of my advisors who made a huge impact in my life. And so, David, if you're watching, just want to say thank you so much for all that you've done to support the chapter down there and me, both personally and professionally. But we're going to talk with Andrea Fogel a little bit about volunteering today. Andrea serves as our Assistant Director of Volunteer Engagement and Training. So Andrea, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I love Delt Day of Giving.
Well,
it's so much fun.
So do we.
Yeah.
Well, Andrea, just to get us started, volunteers are really the core of what we do. And especially chapter volunteers, right?
Yes.
Why are these roles so vital to the fraternity?
I think a big part of it is that they're the steadfast people within the chapter. That usually we have generations that every 4 years, there's another group of undergraduate members where the volunteers are steadfast staying year after year after generation and can sort of understand what that culture of the campus, the traditions of Delt, all those things can be there. And not only are they there to help with the chapter operations, but they're there to really help through the journey of life and what it means to be a Delta Tau Delta member after graduation, and really supporting through that mentorship, life skills, leadership, and just things that you don't usually learn like on your own in a book through a classroom. That's those real life experiences that our volunteers are able to offer.
I often say sometimes having those advisors or volunteers can act as a dad away from home.
Yeah.
Right. And provide that support and provide those soft skills to our members. I know you've worked with tons of leaders and volunteers, not only in the United States, but even across the world. And so when we're talking about someone like Fergie, where he's served 50 years as a chapter advisor, what is the impact of somebody like that?
So something I recently just talked with Fergie about was how I want to sort of mimic in my own volunteer experience with my organization, to be like him, to have that intergenerational connection that he's been able to do with that chapter, and the mentorship that he's done throughout the decades. And I think that's something that we really noticed at the last Catalyst, is that we had members that were fresh out of college. It was their first time volunteering. And here they got to have a meal with Fergie, who had been doing it, almost 50 years at that time, and be able to connect on something that they had a common ground. And that was giving back to Delt. And I think that not just him helping the chapter members, but he's really mentoring other volunteers how to stick with it, to understand their why, of just continuing giving back, whether they're a member of Delt or not, that it's the impact that you're able to make to the younger generations of the men that join this organization.
100%. And, when somebody like Fergie transitions out of that role, he leaves behind huge,
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
shoes to fill. And so what does it take to fill those shoes?
Yeah. So I think one thing is you can't compare. Fergie has made such an impact, and a lot of that is through experience over the years. So, what we can do is really prepare our new onboarding volunteers, especially our chapter advisors, on making sure that they understand the basics. They understand chapter operations, they understand the culture of that campus, of the chapter, understanding how to communicate with the current generation. So, especially if they've been away from college campuses for a long time and they're just coming back into the fold, is to making sure they understand where Gen Z is today. And with that, that we're also working on, well, what is their why? Why are they wanting to give back? What are things that the chapter needs and goals that they're setting? Because that's going to change year after year. And then we provide that mentorship, that education and resources. And it's a continuous education that even though Fergie's been doing it for 50 years, he's still learning year after year on how to be the best support system for his men. And then he just happens to have a lot of things to go back to of experiences that he's learned what to do and what not to do on. So, yeah.
Well, you brought this up, the whole why. Everybody has their specific why of why they give back, why they volunteer. And I'm sure the stories that they can tell that go hand in hand with that are, just monumental.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned how this can be a developmental piece for some of our alumni. And you've seen firsthand how personal development and connection play a role in volunteer retention impact. Can you share a moment or a story that illustrates that?
Yeah. So one thing that always stands out to me, and like I said, I also volunteer for my organization, and something that I always pull up in my goals that I want my women to look back on me the way that this member looked back on their advisor. And so UK received this letter from a member that had graduated several years ago, wasn't ever an officer, was just a member of the chapter. And UK goes over sort of life skills, like things that you should do to be a good citizen, a good partner, a good brother, a good coworker, all these things that he teaches within his chapter. And it made such an impact that several years later, this member wrote to UK and said, "You probably don't remember me, but all these lessons that you taught us have made me the success that I am today, that I use them in everyday life. It's helped with my career, my relationships with my family, all those things." And that he didn't think at the time that it was going to make that big of an impact to him. But as he's got older and really started experiencing life, that those little nuggets of wisdom stuck with him and able to use them every day. And I think that right there, that's goals. Like, I think that's anyone that wants to be a mentor and a volunteer, is that you said something one time and it left an imprint on those that you're mentoring, so that they can come back down the road and go, like it made sense. They weren't just talking to talk. There was a reason behind it, and it made me a better person, a better version of myself. So, yeah.
Well, UK, if you're watching, thank you for all you did to support members. Obviously, the impact that you had has lasted years and years later.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that.
A role model for myself as well. UK is.
He is great. He is great. Well, I know we have Catalyst coming up here relatively shortly. Tell us a little bit about what Catalyst is and how it's not just a training event for, chapter advisors or our volunteers.
Yeah, so Catalyst is really an opportunity for our chapter volunteers and our house corporation officers to come together and to focus on themselves. That this is an opportunity for us to show them more appreciation and to invest in themselves, that we're investing in them and helping them invest in themselves. So that's through personal and professional development. That's connecting with other volunteers so they can create additional friendships that maybe they would have never experienced before, to get best practices, or to just sort of hear like maybe some stories of struggles and realize that they're not alone, that there's other people going through that, especially when you're balancing life and work and volunteering, all of that, that it's an opportunity to come together. Of course, we also have that fun fellowship opportunities and exploring the city, which is going to be Memphis, to see what all Memphis has to offer. But yeah, 2023, of course, was my first Catalyst and absolutely loved it. And I'm even more excited about this Catalyst this year.
Well, I remember going to my first Catalyst too, and it was such a great time to get to hear, the stories of why people continue to volunteer, be involved, and honestly, not just that, but also what makes them them. It was a great time for brotherhood and, like you said, fellowship. But going into the training aspect, what does our training do to actually prepare our volunteers for stepping into that chapter advisor or another volunteer role, especially ones that may have, I'll say, those high expectations, right?
Yeah. I think the first thing is that we teach is understanding your boundaries and what your expectation is. And not only what your expectation of is the role, but also of the people that you're serving and vice versa. And so I think that that's a misconception, is that a volunteer, especially a chapter advisor, goes in and they dictate everything that's done. It's the chapter, it's those men's experience, and volunteers are there to guide them. So we really push that. Education, we do trainings on current chapter operations, the FAR, programming that we offer. So the Compass, Emerges, PresX, talk about those things as well as the educational foundation. And then we have an introduction of our regional governors, because there are also additional mentors and support systems within their regions. And so just making sure that they understand, like, ask questions, utilize your resources that are on My Delt, take trainings that are through Plaid, and reach out to myself or other volunteers that maybe you've met at Catalyst, or maybe it's other people that you looked up to within it, to just sort of understand what is their passion, how do they do things, how do they balance everything. And just as you go through it, you'll find your way, you'll learn it. Like, no one knows right from the gate of what they should be doing. But you just have to ask those questions, go with the flow, and just make sure you're, staying on top of things.
Well, let's take a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, behind the scenes look into a program or even training like Catalyst. That kind of meaningful training isn't free at the end of the day, right? Especially when we are going to a great city, putting on high quality, training events, having outside speakers come in and do some, even personal development. How do gifts on days like today make Catalyst and ongoing volunteer support possible?
There wouldn't be those programs without the donations from today. So a Catalyst, a big portion of that, like you said, is the cost of it. Our volunteers already give so much of their time, their wisdom, energy, and a lot of them donate to the chapter themselves, of whether it's helping put on an executive board and buying, maybe it's lunch for the guys, or donating to that chapter's philanthropies, things like that, that we don't want funds to be a reason why a volunteer can't come. So with Catalyst, we offer it to be completely free. So free transportation, lodging, meals, programming, all of that. And a lot of that support comes from the educational foundation. And as we continue into the next year of what training looks like for our volunteers, we're noticing that there's college trends, that maybe there needs to be additional support. And so that could be something that is certifications that could help them work with their officers. It could help them in their profession, personal life, and they're taking that information that they're learning to then put it into all the different folds of their life. And those things cost money as well. And we never want to put our volunteers out because they already give so much. So Delt Day of Giving is why I love it so much, because the more that is there, the more I can do to support our volunteers.
Well, if anybody's out there watching and isn't a volunteer, but perhaps is looking to be, wants to be involved somehow, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah. So first they can email me We also have an interest form on the website that is under the volunteer page. So just going in there, and you can not only just be a chapter volunteer, house corporation, supporting the educational foundation, board committees, same as the Arch chapter, or even if you want to be a facilitator for our programs that we put on. There's so many different ways to give back and volunteer for Delt. And so we want to be able to provide that any type of chapter you're in your life, there's an opportunity for you to give back, whether you're a Delt, a friend of Delt, a professional in higher education. We want to bring you in to the world of Delta Tau Delta and help us support the men of this organization.
100%. I couldn't say it better myself. And, I think we can both agree, we appreciate our volunteers so much. As you said earlier, the world doesn't stop, right? They have family events going on, work events, and yet they still are able to make the time to give back and help young men whenever the need may arise.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, Volunteer Appreciation Week is next week, right?
Yes.
Anything we should know about that?
It's one of my most favorite times of the year. So it's a week long. We'll be doing a lot of things on all the Delt social media platforms. So whether that's sharing information about statistics of our current volunteers, how you can become a volunteer. If you have a volunteer from Delt that has just made a huge impact in your life, you can nominate them for some really cool Delt merch that we'll be doing drawings on. If you are a current volunteer, make sure you check your email on Tuesday, because there's going to be a nice little gift coming into your inbox to just say thanks for all that you do.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thanks for having me.
A little bit about it. And, getting engaged as an alumnus doesn't have to be in a chapter advisor or volunteer role, right? Of course, you're always going to be invited out to your chapter alumni events, but also one of the great things that we're excited about right now is that we are putting on a little bit more, alumni chapter events and placing greater emphasis on how we can get some of our alumni engaged past graduation. And so be sure to tune back in at 6. We're going to have Travis Gass come in and talk to us a little bit about some of those models and how we are supporting our alumni and how you can get involved if you were looking for that sense of brotherhood that you once had in college. So be sure to tune back in at 6, and we will see you then. But thanks so much for joining.